familiar passages from the Gospels that we've heard so many times. In fact, it's unique. That passage, that story, is repeated in all four of the Gospels. It's the only story in all of the Gospels that's repeated in all four Gospels. They all have a version of it. We just heard John's. You know what's interesting, I think? We hear about a lot of folks in this Gospel. Jesus, of course. But we hear about Thomas, old doubting Thomas. And here he is again tonight. 200 days' wages wouldn't buy enough food for him. Come on. And we hear about Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Hey, we got this boy here. He's got a little stuff. He's got his lunch, but what good is that? Here's my point. Who's the hero of the story? The unnamed little boy. The word that we use in English is child. And there's the Greek word that was used, but for the Jewish people, the word they use for little boy is yeled. And that was a little boy between the ages of 2 and 12. So it's very specific who we're hearing about tonight. We're not hearing about a teenager. We're hearing about a young person. This is not a person who brought some food along thinking maybe he could sell it. This was his lunch. And he says, you know, if you can use it, go ahead. He's the one who's unnamed. Now think about this. Yes, Jesus works a miracle. Did he need the loaves and the fish? No. How are we going to feed all these people? Zap! McDonald's right there. Come on. Jesus, the Son of God, didn't need the loaves and the fish. He tries to get the apostles out there going. What are you going to do about it, boys? Let's see what you come up with, creative guys that you are. And remember, these are the guys who just came back from preaching the good news, and they were all excited about how effective they'd been. And not so much this time. And again, he could have let them go get something. The unnamed little boy with his lunch. And Jesus works with that. He works with that. I think sometimes we need to focus more on that little unnamed boy. Christ works miracles in our lives if we just bring him whatever it is we got. Sometimes we think, I don't have what it takes to do this. Whatever you have, as long as you bring it and give it to Christ, it will be transformed and miracles will take place. Sometimes it just means being there for someone else or touching them on the shoulder and letting them know somebody cares. It means calling somebody who's lonely or grieving. Just being there. What have you brought? You know, we're about to continue with the Mass. And yes, as we listen to John's Gospel, we're being introduced to the very famous passages known as the Bread of Life discourse, where Christ talks about himself under the forms of bread and wine, which are the basis of our teaching about Eucharist. But this starts it. And I think as we reflect on this over the next few weeks, let's start with the basics. In a few minutes, right here, some parish representatives are going to walk down the aisle with some bread and some wine. You know, in the old days of the church, in those early days, everybody brought something. Vegetables, animals, bread, wine, water, milk. They brought whatever they had. Did you ever ask yourself, why does Father wash his hands after the altar is set? The original meaning of that was because Father had been rooting through the gifts and pulling out the best of the bread and the best of the wine, and his hands were dirty. That's where that gesture started from. Everybody brought something, whatever they had. And we now reflect that in that simple ceremony where a family will bring down the bread and the wine. Tonight I ask you, as we watch that procession coming down the aisle, open your hearts, open your souls, and place with that bread and with that wine your gifts. What do you bring tonight? No matter what it is, Christ will take those gifts and transform them and work a miracle in your life and in our lives. What do you bring?